Our next speaker has come all the way. He tells me actually he was cold here this morning. He was hugging the heater. And what I didn't realize, because the part of Canada he comes from gets quite cold in winter, but it's dry cold, not wet cold like here. So our next speaker is Stephen Mandel, who's the mayor of Edmonton in Canada, and has been serving Alberta's capital city for the 3rd term, so very popular with the citizens when you get elected 3 times. I think one thing I'd say that's very important in relation to Stephen is to say that he is a businessman before running for public office. He had 30 years of experience in the private sector. He's also been a community activist in organizations like the Mazakoski, I hope I get this right, Heart Institute, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, the Jewish Community Center, and the Alan Gray Continuing Care Center. So he's combined a background in business, a background in community, and since 2004 has been mayor of the city of Edmonton and a strong advocate for Alberta municipalities, ensuring they receive a fair share of funding to pay for vital infrastructure and community service. He has a particular commitment to the green vision for his own city and for his own country. And I want to call now on Stephen to address you. Stephen.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Peter. For those of you who don't know, I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. It is further north than Dublin. It does get colder, but the dampness of the cold here seems to go right through you. And so I stood this morning by the heater and hugged the heater for a while. It was quite enjoyable, to be honest with you. Peter, congratulations on a wonderful conference. There's been some fascinating discussions and some really incredible information that's come forward. I guess I'm here today as the practical issue on business city collaboration, and I think that's really something that I think our city has been really worked on for a number of years. And so I hope to show examples of what we've been able to do over the last number of years, but also to relate it to a variety of other things. One of the most important parts about our city's desire to work with business is that we have to have three, I think, very important ingredients. First of all, whatever we do has to be entrepreneurial. And entrepreneurial doesn't necessarily mean you have to make money, but it has to be entrepreneurial in the sense it must accomplish the goal it's supposed to accomplish without, then the second part, without any interference with politicians. You need to move us out of the way. We create and make decisions that sometimes are politically directed rather than necessarily directed towards the goal. And finally, there must be adequate controls over the relationship between the business and the city, so you make sure that you're not left out in the cold as a politician, so someone doesn't go back and say, well, look what they did, you didn't know what they were doing. So it's vitally important to have those three ingredients together. Our city is about 900,000 people, and our region is 1.2 million people. And we've engaged in a number of public-private partnerships, more to do with not exactly traditional P3, but more to do with a sense of us being a owner and working with a separate entity within our own corporation. By working in the private sector, though, we've been able to extend our reach into the community, accelerate progress on key initiatives, and open opportunities for citizens and local businesses to thrive in our community. And those people we want to deal with, we look at very carefully and very closely. Want to make sure they have the kind of social conscience that are important for our city, the financial whereabouts to make sure they can complete the project we work with them, and also to understand that they need to work with our city for the long term, not the short term. There are many examples where we've aligned with different private sector groups, and I'll go through a few of them, not a bunch, a few of them. We could be here all day, and you don't want to do that either. And so I think that yesterday I had the opportunity to speak about waste management, and I think that's a perfect example of one of the ways our city needed to move forward. We, as a city, got to the end of our capacity in our landfill. And our citizens did not want more landfill. It was not within the options we had, nor would we be acceptable to build any incineration. That's something that our citizens refused to do. So we needed to create solutions that would be met the needs of our citizens, but also meet the goal of our city, which is to create a zero-waste model. To move our goal forward, we couldn't do all of with the city. We looked to have partners. And our first major partner was with a private utility, which needed to develop a system of supplying compost for the decommissioning of local coal mines. So they worked with the city to build a composter, which is the size of 2 football fields. And those different positions were aligned. We received the ability to process compost through a system, and they received the final compost. And so it was a huge win-win situation. From that, we've been able to develop this industrial park, which also includes a private-public partnership with an electronics recycling facility, a paper recycling facility, and finally our newest biofuels facility, which will take the residual materials that are left within our landfill and use them to develop methanol and ethanol. And those products will then be sold in the public market for profit, and then the city will then get some of those residual amounts. In each of these, we've collaborated in a way that the research and development phase helped to prove the technology would work, because we were dealing with new technologies. And each ultimately allowed us to move forward, creating long-term continuum of success, which would reach our goal of zero waste. And by 2015, if all goes well, 90% of the waste of our city will be processed through this entire system, which effectively, if one looks at the literature, that creates a zero waste system. In our case, what did the citizens receive? We attract private sector people to do the kind of things that we didn't really have the capacity to do. We did not have the kind of financial ability or the knowledge to do that. So opening up the opportunity, we created a situation for them to be profitable, for us to get the rewards from it, and also then the residual amounts of money that come back to the city that creates about a 30% cost savings to our waste process. And so one of the big advantages to our city was that we no longer had to pay 100% of the cost. It got down by 30%, which in a situation like we have a very large waste system, it was a substantial savings. As a city government, all cities face challenges of money. We have very limited revenues and very limited resources to generate that revenue. And so we need to find other ways to engage business in ways in which we can create the kind of communities our citizens expect. And so I'll give another few examples. Not exactly the traditional P3 partnerships, but one we think have been very beneficial to our city. We're a very rapidly growing city, one that has a tremendously fast-paced growing economy. Unlike the rest of the world, we did not see a recession. We are oil-based, and oil is still being sold to people at exorbitant prices. So we face problems of getting people into housing. And so we created what was called the first-time home buyers. And so we worked with private enterprise to create land source for them. They would have to build housing at a reduced price, carry mortgages back, so that we allow younger generation to get into houses. If you cannot attract and retain younger people in your community, you're in big trouble. And so this opened up a variety of opportunities for people who are just first starting out in our city to get access to a house. We thought that was very important. Our homelessness problem, I don't know what it was like in Dublin, but we had a substantial problem. And we looked at solving that through the Housing First model, which again was a partnership of government and private enterprise to find places for people to live. Because if you can't get a roof over their head, you can't begin to solve the problems they face in homelessness. And so that was another way in which we worked together. We would develop programs and support systems and financial support, but we would not operate the facilities. That's one of the great challenges for government, is to realize that you can't be all things to all people, and the one thing you can't do very well is operate things efficiently because of the bureaucratic nature with which you have. We do the same thing today with our arts communities. We've set up a separate entity called our Arts Council. We fund that Arts Council through a sum of money. They then allocate that money to various arts groups in the city, who then have to find ways themselves to operate on an ongoing basis. We don't fund 100% of it. We fund maybe 10 to 12% of their budgets, maybe 8% of their budgets. And that forces them to realize that they have to search out business partnerships. They have to search out other avenues to generate revenue so they can be successful. And I think these kinds of things make a real difference. And I guess one of the other ones on the social side is the seniors. We have about 20 senior centers in Edmonton. We do the same thing. We allocate money and buildings to them, but they must function as an independent source. And that's really important because they need to determine their own destiny. We as a city, it's not our job to tell seniors how and what they want to do during the course of a day. If we try to do that, it'll cost citizens a whole bunch more money and not be near as effective. There's one little story I want to tell in our Housing First model with our homelessness. We had a fella in our city who was a business person, sold his business, and got a calling to get involved in our homelessness situation. He single-handedly, as a business person, without any benefit to himself, created about 4 or 5 different social enterprises, housed over 650 people himself, and he makes sure, they're like his flock. He makes sure on a weekly, monthly basis through the team he set up, they have job opportunities, they have friends, they have places to go, and they have an environment in which to be successful. He's a remarkable man, and I think that's the kind of soul you need to have in a city to be successful in doing the kind of things that we all want to do in our cities to make life better for our citizens. I'll give you a few other examples. One of the things we've wanted to do is encourage our young people within our city to stay in Edmonton, to create opportunities for them. And we have one called Startup Edmonton. It's a group of young people, and they say they're scrappy, disruptive startup entrepreneurs kickstarting the city from the inside out, and that's on their website. They're entrepreneurs across all enterprises and industries, from technology, the arts, social enterprises. And they've created a large local startup network to engage young entrepreneurs in growing industries within their own hometown. We funded this to get it off the ground. And this was a partnership. They sell shares in the company because they are out to make a profit. And so there's a rate of return. They'll come back to us. But again, we are at arm's length. We have no ongoing support for them. But in return, what they've done is they've created a new and dynamic community downtown. They've opened up some warehousing, and they've offered opportunities for a younger generation to have access to and each other and create a very dynamic and interactive community. And it's fascinating because they're all young people. And you get a chance at my age to go to visit them. It's quite remarkable. Just like Adam earlier today. He's an amazing young man. You get excited listening to PhD students and younger generation, the ones who are really going to build your community and our community for the future. And I think that really it's been a wonderful experience for us to see how successful this has been and what a great partnership it is. We as a city have developed other kinds of partnerships which are wholly owned by the city that have been incredibly successful. I think that's where many communities should look to go to in the long term. Like all cities, you start out small. 100 years ago, we were 8,000 or 10,000 people, and nobody wanted to supply us with telephones or power or water. And so we developed our own systems. And so over those years, those systems became larger and larger and larger. And all of a sudden, we found out that we could sell those products to other people. Some of them we couldn't be quite as successful at because the competitiveness and the capital costs were substantial. But two in particular, power and water, were a company we spun off from the city. We set up a separate company. At one point in time, it generated 80% of its revenue inside the city and 20% outside the city. It was worth probably about $1.5 billion to $2 billion. Now 80% of its revenue is outside the city and 20% is inside. It's probably worth about $9 or $10 billion. And that's because the one thing we did is we separated from the city government. There's nobody in this. We own 100% of it. It's set up as a separate private corporation. It has to fund itself. There's no tax dollars. It gives us actually between about close to $200 million of a return every year on our investment. It's an incredible success, and it's a model. And the model works because we, as a political entity, have meetings 4 times a year. We're informed, but as shareholders, and they're allowed to operate in a very, very competitive world. And they have plants all over Canada and the United States, and they're growing on an ongoing basis. They're growing because they have a board of directors that talk about business. They don't look at necessarily the social good, which is not always the best. They look at the bottom line and how they're going to be able to deliver their service in a cost-effective way because their number one goal is to deliver back to us, a city, the dividend, which allow us then to deliver the service to our city. I talked earlier about our waste management. It's something I'm incredibly proud of. over a number of years, we've really become a city that is focused on dealing with the opportunities that waste management can bring to our citizens and trying to strive to be a zero waste city. When we did that, I said to our city manager and to our staff, why are we not trying to sell this commodity to other people? We're experts. Few people know as much about garbage as we do. Always interesting about garbage. And so we've endeavored to create a new corporation. It's called Waste Resolutions. And it's a new company we just started a few months ago, about 6 or 7 months ago. And its goal is to go out and market our skill set to other communities around the world to show how we can help them solve their waste solutions. We've got programs going with a variety of places, and it's been incredibly interesting and dynamic because it's one of those things that people don't realize. Everybody has garbage. You got to get rid of it, and we know how to get rid of it really good. And so as a result of that, it's been fascinating, and hopefully this will develop into a business, and it is about making money. There's no illusions about this. We're not going to go out there and this isn't a social good. It'll end up being a social good, but this is about making money back for our citizens to deliver services to our citizens, which is really, I think, about the public-private partnerships that really you don't want to forget. At the end of the day, it is about getting back money for your citizens to deliver the services that are so important to deliver to them that they need in order to build a great city. And we believe Waste Resolutions can be another company that will start out very small, because that's how companies should start. And it'll grow over. It might take 10 or 15 years, but we believe we'll set up a substantial opportunity for our citizens to reap the profits, but also deliver an amazing service. The companies right now that we have that sell water or power to various cities, they do a great job for them. It's done competitively, effectively, efficiently. They're good businesses, and this will be the same thing. I'm a big believer in the opportunities that are created through business. I'm still a business person, but for 30 years, I was in private enterprise. And I really deeply believe that if you allow people to be successful and not to butt in as a politician, but to make sure you oversee the operation of it, there are great opportunities for cities to get involved in making rates of return for their citizens and go back into the services they really need. And I'm quite excited about the future for our city in doing this. And we've done more and more over the last number of years. And I sometimes, I didn't notice it as much until I came here and started thinking about what's going on, is that this is a great social enterprise for cities, whether you're emerging, whether you're from developing countries. Find the small ones. But it's really important, I believe, that you look at it in a way as setting up a proper system and know who you're getting into a partnership with. Because it is who you partner with will determine your success or failure. And if you get in a partnership with someone just because they're selling you the big dream, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. Look at the practical side of it. Look at it's going to be 10, 20, 30, 40 years before you're going to see any major results. That's what happened to us. We don't expect our waste solutions to be in the next 3 or 4 years. We think it's 15 or 20 years out. It took 80 or 90 years for our water system to make the kind of money it is. So don't look at the short term, look at the long term, which is often a challenge for politicians. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. It's been very interesting, and we'll look forward to having some discussion. Thank you.